Hi everyone, welcome back to Ilum Sabers. Today's video is one that I've been really excited to make. It's going to be the next in the Luke Skywalker lightsaber video series. This is going to be Ryan from RPK Customs take on the Luke Resin stunt belt hanger. So we'll go over a little bit about what that means, what this lightsaber is from, and then we're also going to go over just the fantastic craftsmanship that went into making the hilt. So Ryan um, modeled it, made a mold, and then made these resin hilts, and then he also finished them, painted them, um, put all of the little parts on and everything. So these came finished from Ryan. So if you are interested, and I'll go ahead and mention this later on as well, but these are, I think, $150 on his website, and they come completely finished like this. You can also get them unfinished, I think, for around $50 or $60, but for just the great finishing job that he does on this, unless you really enjoy the DIY process more than displaying or anything like that, if you really enjoy the DIY process, then I could see why you would want to get one of them unfinished. Otherwise, for the price difference, the work that he does on them is fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the desk camera, and we'll get a little bit better look at the hilt. We're going to go over from top to bottom some of the specs on it and talk about the history of this hilt as well. All right, so this is the RPK Customs Luke Resin Stunt Belt Hanger. This lightsaber is from Return of the Jedi. There is a scene where Luke is jumping from the little speeder where he's fighting the henchmen to the main skiff where Jabba and Leia are. And for that scene, Mark Hamill does a stunt where he jumps from the speeder to the skiff, and he lands on the side of the skiff and then pulls one of the henchmen out the window. And so when he lands on that skiff, you'll see a lightsaber hanging from his belt, and that is this lightsaber here. The reasoning for that is because the other hilts they'd been using up to this point, the V2, the Yuma, all of those were all metal, and so those would hurt a lot if you're doing a jump like that. They're also really heavy, so like for stunts, maybe they'd throw off your balance, or if it fell, it could really get damaged or hurt somebody. But I think the main reason they did it was really because the way he was landing that jump, the hilt would be pressed up against his leg, and a really heavy metal hilt like that would really cause some bruising and have some real potential for doing some damage. So they opted for using a lighter resin copy of what they've been using so far. And I use the term copy loosely because this is really very different from all of the other hilts that we see. There's also another scene where he uses it a little later in the same sequence. It is, I believe, right before he and Leia swing down off of the main skiff as it's about to explode. So there are two scenes where you can see it, but the one where Luke is landing on the skiff and climbing up is a much better side shot of it, but you really don't see a lot of it. During that scene, I think you see it from maybe like this angle here. Or maybe it's like this. Like it's a bad shot of the hilt for a prop maker anyway. It's not a good reference photo. But Ryan had enough to go off of, and he created this beautiful replica. So we're just going to go over this from top to bottom and kind of talk about what makes it different from the other Luke Skywalker hilts that we've reviewed on this channel, and some of the others you might see. So starting at the top, I think this is really interesting. This lightsaber has the little nub coming out of the emitter here, like the Yuma and the Hero and the V2. However, it's widely believed that this is a resin stunt of the V3. So skipping down a little bit to the clamp, you'll see that there's a hole here and then on the other side as well, which kind of shows that this is the V3 clamp that this is cast from. So it's really interesting to me that while this is cast from the V3, you've got that V2 and Hero and Yuma type of emitter. I don't really know what the reasoning is behind that. I don't know what would have made the difference. Obviously, the V3 does not have that. The V3 is flat, and that comes through in the R2 resin stunt, because the R2 resin stunt also has a flat emitter. So I'm not really sure what the difference was, and I'd love to find out. If anybody has any theories or knows anything about that, please send me a message or put it in the comments, because I've asked around some of my friends who are I would consider more knowledgeable than me on the topic of all the different iterations of the Luke lightsaber from episode 6, and most people just don't really know. It's kind of a mystery. But moving down a little bit, you'll see that this emitter has some of this black paint on it, which is very reminiscent of the V2. And really, the Yuma and the production V3, all of the hilts that they were using in the film kind of had this blotchy black weathering on it. So they're definitely trying to evoke the idea of the V2 here. And then this part of the neck here is actually wrapped in gaffer's tape. So that is very similar to the V2. The V2 is wrapped in gaffer's tape. You'll see that this is actually like tight. It's flush against the neck, as opposed to the V2, where a lot of the V2s you see have it loose and kind of uncoiling. And that's because the V2 gaffer's tape did start to uncoil when it was in museums and things later on. But during production, it would have been tight around the neck. And during production, the gaffer's tape was tight around the neck of the resin belt hanger as well. And then moving down, you really get into the section that makes this hilt really unique. So this entire grip section here it looks like sand blasted. I talked to Ryan about his process doing this because I thought it was really interesting. He used a special type of textured paint, and then he clear coated it to kind of lock that in. So it's not actually sand, but it really looks like it. And when you look at the reference photos of the hilt on Hamill's belt, it definitely has that sandblasted look, like they were out in the desert and maybe they painted it in a hurry, and before it was dry, sand got all over it, or maybe sand was just coating it some way or other. But it definitely was covered in sand in those photos, which is super interesting. So Ryan from RPK did a great job at really replicating this sand-blasted look. All the way around, you'll see that it's just super grimy, super dirty looking, very, very much coated in that sand kind of look. And, you know, kind of as you would expect with a Luke Return to the Jedi saber, it kind of has that ugly look like the V2 does and like the V3 does, like the Yuma does. It wasn't really until the Hero that things started to get a little bit more refined, a little bit cleaner looking. But this sandblasted part here is my absolute favorite part of this hilt. I think it looks really, really cool and really unique. Moving down a little bit, we'll get to the clamp section here. And, you know, as we were talking about earlier, this is very clearly a V3 clamp. This is one of the reasons why we know that it was some kind of cast of the V3, is because of this clamp. I suppose it's possible that this is maybe a cast of another stunt that they had with the V3 clamp on it. It's really hard to tell when it comes to these things, but the clamp does seem to like evoke the idea of the V3, because this is the same clamp that we've seen on the V3. So you've got the hole here. and then also the Graflex logo is upside down. So you can see it says Graflex, but it is upside down, and that's how the V3 is as well. You can see the clamp lever here, and then a little bit of the kind of messiness underneath that, which is part of the resin process. And you can actually see that on the photos we have of the R2 stunt, that it is like that as well. Going down a little further to the booster section, you can see once again we've got that black blotchy weathering that is very reminiscent of the V2, of the Yuma. And then we've got the pommel. And the D-ring here is actually a new type of D-ring that Ryan started using when he did his prototype of this hilt, and he sent out the first few commissions. The D-ring he was using was thinner and longer, kind of a stretched out look. But then he changed to this one, and I asked him about it, and he shared with me some of the reference photos he was using, and really has a compelling argument for why he thinks that they actually used the same D-ring that we see on the V3, which kind of makes sense because we've got some evidence that this was cast from the V3, and if they had one D-ring that they used on the V3, it's likely that they had more than one. They sourced them from, the same place. So this is kind of a small change that he made. If you buy one now, you'll get one with this kind of ring on it. And if you have one from, earlier in the run, or you run across one secondhand or something and it has that other kind of ring, you could always switch it out. The other thing is, because the photos are so blurry, it really is hard to say. So kind of either one is just as good at this point until we are able to find some better photos. And then lastly, I kind of want to talk about this clamp card here. This is the ESB style clamp card that we see in the ESB Graflex, as opposed to what we see in the V2, which is, the clamp card that is pretty much specific to that hilt. We do see this clamp card cast into the R2 resin stunt as well. So it's really interesting. At some point, it seems like whatever metal hilt they were using for the casting process, which seems to be the V3, at some point it must have had this ESB style clamp card in the clamp in order to create all of these resin stunts that also have that, clamp card, because this isn't a clamp card. This is just part of the resin mold that's been painted. You can't take this out or anything like that. I mean, it's part of the mold, meaning that, when they were making these props, that's the clamp card that had to be in the V3. It's really hard to tell, why that would have been. Most of the reference photos that we have of the V3 during production, we're pretty sure that that's not the card that they're using. And so it's really difficult to kind of figure that out and kind of get a good grasp on kind of what's going on there. There are so many variations here. Like I mentioned earlier with the flat emitter versus the emitter with the nub on the end, it's really difficult to kind of pin all of that down and figure out what's going on. So that's just kind of one of the other mysteries here, is that we've got the ESB style clamp card on this one and on the R2 resin stunt, which means that that clamp card must have been in the clamp when the cast was made. But the actual quality of this hilt that Ryan did is fantastic. I mean, he did all of the painting, all of the weathering, all of the texturing. And you can see, I mean, it's just fantastic. You've got the seam running from top to bottom on both sides, because it is a resin cast, and you can actually see that on all of the resin cast props. So that is a super nice, accurate detail. You can see it actually runs across the emitter and across the pommel. I mentioned earlier, but the price for an unfinished resin DIY kit is, I believe, $60 on his website, maybe $70, but for just a little more, for $150 total, you can have him paint it and do it for you just like this. And so I really think that that is really just a great price point for having him do it, especially since he's so knowledgeable about it. He did so much research, and at this point he's done so many of these. It's going to come out looking really good. So I definitely recommend this. I might in the future do a video kind of comparing this to the R2 stunt, comparing it to the V2 because of the similarities with the gaffer's tape and the nub on the emitter, talking about the clamp card differences, those kinds of things. But for this hilt, for this video, I really just wanted to do kind of an unboxing kind of review of this hilt, because I just am really, really pleased with how Ryan has done this. I mean, it's fantastic. All of the details are there, all of the weathering, all of the paint. It's really, really expertly done, expertly applied. And one thing that he talked about was he had some trouble early on in the prototype phase. He wanted to use a pressure chamber to keep the resin from kind of bubbling and having little air bubbles in it. And I know he had some issues with that, and even had a bit of a scare with some of the equipment kind of malfunctioning in a dangerous way. And so he thought he wasn't going to be able to do it. And I think he did end up finding a way around that and being able to use a pressure chamber in a safer way. And I have to say I'm really impressed because, I mean, this is a really, really smooth job. I mean, you look at the emitter, very, very smooth across there. There's really no bubbling you can see, maybe a little tiny bit right there. But that's like all I see. And, you know, the R2, the resin stunt, that one was, I think, before he was using that method. And so you can see some bubbling on it, but it's really nothing serious. I mean, it's part of, I think, the process of it being resin, really. But I really think that these came out great. The fact that he was able to perfect that method to really get a nice clean finish all the way across, I just really applaud him for. I think that was a fantastic addition to this run. And I just think they came out really great. So from top to bottom, I definitely give this an A+, especially given how little there was to work on. He really came out with a fantastic product for this. It's a fantastic variation on the Luke hilt. And this, I just can't get over this textured sandblasted grip here. I mean, that's easily my favorite part about it. It just is so grimy and looks so much like the photo. It's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the other camera, do the outro. But this hilt is really fantastic. If you're thinking about it, definitely go for it. It's a great, great addition to any collection of Luke hilts. It's fantastic on its own or in a group of them. I can't say enough good things about this hilt. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. I am really, really excited about this hilt. I had a great time reviewing it. It's going to be fantastic displayed next to the R2 resin stunt. I just am very, very pleased with all of the awesome stuff that Ryan puts out. So again, RPK Customs is who has done this hilt. I believe he's the only one that's ever done the R2 and the resin belt hanger. So if you're interested in having kind of the complete lineup of Luke ROTJ sabers, or you just want some of the more obscure ones, that's definitely where to go. He does a great job with these. I mean, from top to bottom, it's fantastic. There's nothing about this that I look at and think that it was poorly done or shortcuts were taken or anything like that. So very well done to Ryan. Thank you for making this. I think that's a fantastic thing to have that prop available. And thank you for tuning into the video. Until next time, may the force be with you.